So thank you everyone for joining us for this morning's presentation on highlights from this year's World Parkinson Congress. My name is Amy and I am an Education and Support Services Coordinator at Parkinson Society, British Columbia, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. First, I want to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar and it will be available afterwards, including all available handouts and links, and it will also be on our website. As you're listening today, please feel free to ask any questions or comments you have along the way. I will be keeping an eye on the chat box, which is found on the right-hand side of your screen, so if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to enter them there. Finally, before we begin, please be sure to adjust your speaker volume both on your computer and on your actual speakers so that you can hear our presenter well. Now I'm going to hand our microphone over to our presenter this morning, CEO of Parkinson Society BC, Jean Blake.
Good morning and welcome everyone. This is a few months after the Congress, but nice to be able to give you an overview. This is the third Congress I've been fortunate enough to attend. Was at the one in Portland 3 years ago and 3 years before that in Montreal. And I will say that I think the activity around research and what is happening, you can just see the growth of the number of projects and the number of people that are involved in this. So it was very hopeful at this Congress in terms of there being something happening to intervene with the progress of this disease, if not something more momentous. So you see in front of you a screen there. This was the opening ceremonies. It was very emotional. There was a wonderful choir that had met just earlier that day for their first in-person practice. They were participants from across the globe, and so this was part of the opening, and that was set the stage, I think, for the rest of the Congress. My arrow's not working. There we go. It's a beautiful, beautiful site, Kyoto, where the Congress was held. The left-hand photo is a picture outside the Congress building. They just had these fabulous gardens, including this pond where there were swans. So it was a very uplifting environment as well. And there's just a shot on the right-hand side of one of the rivers that flows through Kyoto. Kyoto is on an inlet of the ocean and has many rivers flowing through it. Many of the residential areas are right alongside riverways, so it's a very, very beautiful, beautiful city. The crane was really featured in this Congress, and to the Japanese, the crane is a symbol of hope and healing. It represents good fortune and longevity. They really refer to the crane as a bird of happiness. And the wings of the crane are believed to carry souls up to paradise. On the right-hand picture, that's actually a crane that I got a picture of on the left, doing a walk by one of the riverways one morning. On the right, that's from I went to Japan a week early and had a bit of a vacation sightseeing, never been to Japan before. And on the right-hand side, that is a steel crane. A bit of a sad history on this one. It's located at Kaisen Park in Fukushima. That's where the nuclear meltdown happened in 2011. And it was a gift from the Americans. It's melted from steel recovered at the World Trade Center in New York City. And just the story behind that is there were a number of Japanese citizens killed in that attack. And a little bit of history about the exchange of cranes. Can we go forward? Mm-hmm. Come on, won't go. There's a story behind how the crane really became quite a publicized symbol of hope. It has been for centuries in Japan, but with the advent of paper becoming much cheaper, these origami cranes began to be produced. And this young woman was a victim of the Hiroshima bombing in World War II, and she set out to fold 1,000 paper cranes as a symbol of her hope for her family and healing. She did unfortunately die from her leukemia, her cancer, that as a result of the bombing. But the cranes began to be a symbol after that, when any healing was needed, let's say. And so when the bombing at Ground Zero happened, Japan sent many paper cranes to be set up at the fence near Ground Zero. And so in response, when the nuclear meltdown happened in Fukushima in 2011, the Americans responded by providing this steel crane from steel recovered at the World Trade Center. So it had quite a strong message throughout the Congress. Can we take that forward? And here you see in the exhibition hall, there were thousands of paper cranes that are displayed coming down from each of these umbrellas from many countries across the globe. People contributed them. And we were very fortunate. We have one of the umbrellas with the cranes, which we will be displaying at BC's provincial conference, October 26th. In addition to the paper cranes, there were 153 support groups, communities, exercise groups that did crane dances. And these were sent and knit together in this incredible video. You could sit off to the side there. There was a video playing constantly showing these dances. And we do have one of our support groups who participated in this. And if you go to our website, you can watch that 2-minute video. In addition, there was a Spanish community in the US that they didn't make paper cranes, but each one of these tiny little squares is a feather. And then the 7 main feathers that you can see there around hope represented the 7 continents of the world. And this was sent again to the Congress to symbolically strengthen the wings of the origami crane. So it was quite emotional, this piece. And again, it had reached throughout the activities of the conference. There was a wonderful wellness way. Those of you who've been lucky enough to attend a Congress know that there's opportunities for people to participate in exercise, meditation, massage. There was incredible boxing and drumming activity where you could box, or you could go to the big Japanese drums and box. And there was a very active tennis table tournament going on, and the gentleman who won was actually he had quite a lot of dyskinesia, and it was just amazing to watch him when he would play the table tennis. There were round tables. It was really, I think, having people sharing, supporting one another in terms of living well with Parkinson's, and how different people were approaching their staying as well as possible with the disease. There is a lot of focus on the wearable devices, and we're seeing a lot of research in terms of can wearable devices help with better diagnosis and then appropriate therapy. We know we have one research project happening here in the Okanagan where people are wearing a strap on the affected side, both on the wrist and the ankle. Their symptoms throughout the day are uploaded to a small cell phone sized computer that they carry, and then uploaded to the researcher, the physician who is overseeing this project. They also do some diarizing of their day in terms of activity and nutrition, and that is then put together. Hope there is that perhaps there can be care provided remotely. We know that there are a number of still large wait lists throughout, especially here in BC, in terms of accessing specialists. There are other devices as well in terms of can they help stabilize, for example, your hand when you're writing. And just, I think a lot of very different approaches being taken to assist with activity and, of course, research. Talked a little bit about one of the ones in terms of how to look at therapy as related to activity throughout the day, and the watch. This is a lady who actually has Parkinson's and developed a watch to help her in terms of being able to draw, never mind write. And it's been very successful. Prior to the Congress, there was a leadership forum. This was leaders from across the globe to come together and look at issues and what is happening and how could we share what various societies are doing with one another to improve our support and information and education to the Parkinson's community. So these were the 5 areas that we discussed, and came up with a wealth of information from different communities across the globe. And we, of course, are benefiting from that in terms of sharing that information back here at home. As well, there was a day of special presentations the day before the Congress started. And the one that I went to was advances in research. There was a lot of information around advances in deep brain stimulation. We know the rechargeable batteries now were the first ones that came out. You had to sit for roughly 2 hours a day and be hooked up to power to recharge your battery. And they had to be changed still roughly every 4 to 5 years. The newest one now, they have one that is supposed to last 15 years, although nobody's worn one that long. But the real benefit is that it only has to be recharged once a week, and it's very quick. It's about a half hour. So very exciting. The points for programming, there's 8 points versus some of the early ones, which had 2 points. So that means that you can have a much more individualized, precise delivery system, and also can be programmed to avoid more of the unwanted side effects. There's been a lot of research and work on infusion therapies, and nothing, unfortunately, around that's ready on the market other than apomorphine, the last one there. That one is on the market, being readily used in Europe. And it's only for people with really advanced Parkinson's, but it has a leveling effect on symptoms. Here in Canada, we did get approval for apomorphine as a rescue injection. And so I know that it's not widely available yet, but I do know that it's slowly finding its way into the therapy that physicians have available to them. And what it's being used as a rescue here is more, you get, you take the injection and it gives you a couple hours to get back onto your regular doses of levodopa. People that have really severe off periods, sudden off periods where they get next to no warning that they're going to go off, this can be a very helpful piece. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of interventions and better therapies. I think also in terms of trying to look at, instead of invasive therapies like DBS or the pump, are there things that can be done external to the brain? And so there are some exciting innovations happening around wearable devices for around the skull, around the ear, so that perhaps these stimulations can reach the part of the brain that is being stimulated by deep brain stimulation, but without the invasive surgery. So nothing that's on the market yet, but there are some interesting and exciting advances there. Gene therapy and immunotherapy, again, these are research areas where there's some exciting information happening, but nothing yet that was marketable. But I think just an incredible number of advances that are being made in these areas, which makes us very hopeful that something is going to happen within the next 5 years or so. One of the really exciting presentations that I went to was on these iPS cells. This was announced actually at the World Congress in Portland. Dr. Yamanaka from Japan received the 2012 Nobel Laureate for his work in physiology medicine. It's really about reprogramming our own mature body cells to become pluripotent, including neurons. And what that means is that they can take like a skin cell and turn it into a neuron. So this is very, very exciting. They have done some clinical trials already for macular degeneration and also immunotherapy work in cancer with animal research. And there seem to be very good results happening. In Japan, there is a new trial with a Parkinson's patient that is happening. And this, as a husband and wife team, the Dr. Takahashis, they have taken these pluripotent stem cells that they've turned into neurons and injected them into the brain. With monkey models, they have seen a significant improvement. These are monkey models that have been induced to have Parkinson's disease. And so there's been 2 years and there seems to be significant improvement. So they did as well do, as I said earlier, the very first trial on humans was producing retinal cells that were damaged by age-related macular degeneration. So that was done in 2014, and they have seen significant improvements there. So they did this year get an approval to try it for heart disease. And in 2018, they also had approval to try it with Parkinson's, and they did their very first patient in November of 2018. They injected him only on one side of his brain, and they should be actually proceeding to the second side sometime soon. They wanted to make sure that there were no deleterious effects before they did the other side. And they do have 7 patients that they're hoping to do after him that they will follow for 2 years. Oops, I want to go back to that one and just finish off. So there's one issue with this even if it works well, they've gone to they have a very limited gene pool, shall I say, that's probably the wrong word, a very specific gene pool in Japan, and compared to the rest of the world, they have a population that's not had a lot of crossover with other population groups. And so even if it works for these folks in Japan, there will have to be a fair bit of research to figure out how that's going to be exported to the rest of the world, because the gene pool, of course, is much larger when you get outside of Japan. So there are some issues with this, but it still is very hopeful and exciting research. One of the other presentations I went to, and sorry, this slide is a little bit fuzzy, but there's not been a really good definition of advanced Parkinson's disease across the world. And that's helpful both for therapy, for clinical research, and in our case, for advocacy to some degree. So they have done over several years this process to try and get the specialists to agree on what a diagnosis or definition of advanced Parkinson's disease would be. And this is what they've come up with. They said this 5-2-1 definition. so that you are taking at least 5 doses of levodopa per day, that you are experiencing 2 hours or more of off periods, and 1 hour or more of troublesome dyskinesia. So, and these symptoms cannot be improved with oral medications or patches, wearing patches, that the signs are increasing complications and more poorly controlled with the optimized oral medications. And usually they also say that people will have had the disease for at least 10 years and that they are seeing their activities of daily living being compromised. So for you as a person with Parkinson's, that's probably not all that earth-shattering, but I think for the clinicians, this is a helpful definition. And also, as I say, as advocates, it's also a helpful definition. So I think also the definition is intended to have people understand the realities of the progression of their disease, and that medication dosages can't always be increased and achieve symptom control. Then we're looking at those other options, which are still somewhat limited. With deep brain stimulation here in BC, of course, we've had a bit of advance towards doubling the number of surgeries this year, and although they still haven't recruited a second neurosurgeon, they are working on it. We know that's still not quite enough. So that option is there, but it's still not as accessible as it needs to be. Pump therapies, of course, we have the duodopa, the gel that's enters through a stoma that is put into the small intestine, thereby avoiding any of the gastric issues a person has to deal with oral meds being swallowed into the stomach and then eventually into the intestines. Very limited still access to that, and of course it's very, very expensive, which is one of the reasons why it has been an issue. I think still remains a bit of an issue here in BC. We shall see. We've had a cap of 5 procedures per year, which we've not passed to date. However, there are more physicians that are being trained in the process, and we'll see how that goes going forward. We figure from the clinicians' information that we probably need about 20 such procedures per year here in British Columbia. I mentioned just briefly the apomorphine infusion earlier, and instead of just being an injectable rescue medication, in Europe they are using this as a therapy for people with advanced Parkinson's. So it's less invasive than either DBS or duodopa, as it's needle under the skin. But then if any of you know about insulin pumps for people with diabetes, it's kind of the same approach. So you do have to change the location of the needle every day, and but it does give roughly, from the presentation I went to, roughly the same benefits as the duodopa. However, it is not available in Canada anywhere. So at this point, it's waiting till a pharmaceutical company makes an application to Health Canada, and then it goes through the Common Drug Review, and then each of us provinces have to advocate to get it covered. Oral meds are still an option, although obviously if you're taking meds 8 to 10 times a day, your side effects, your weight loss, your frailty are going to greatly increase. So that was really being held up as not a very good option for most people that are already this advanced. Personalized medicine was talked about a lot, mainly because Parkinson's disease is no longer considered just to be one disease, that there are broader clinical subtypes and smaller subtypes within that. They talked about 3 different categories, which most people with Parkinson's will fall into, and that is where it's mainly motor symptoms that you're having to deal with, and the slower progression of the disease. If you fall into the group with, they call it intermediate Parkinson's, then you're going to be experiencing more of the non-motor symptoms, and those may even be more difficult for you to manage than the motor issues. And the third category, which is fortunately very small percentage of people, is much more malignant, more cognitive impairment, more balance issues, and random behavior disorders. And so I think the approach is that each of these need to be handled quite differently, and individually you need to be handled quite differently as well. And they do have some rationale for this in terms of the research, that there are people that develop Parkinson's and they don't get the synuclein issues, that there's a lot of variation and factors in terms of how it will manifest. We know that vascular disease is being seen now as contributing to more management, symptom management for people with Parkinson's. So that is the background behind why exercise is going to be helpful to you, why some nutrition and diet changes will be helpful. And there is, of course, still the all the suspected causes, including pesticide exposure, some of the gene mutations, head injury, other chemical exposures, and other genetic variables. So they're really finding, as they do more and more research, you know, the Dr. McEwen out at UBC I've heard him say that if you've seen one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's. So no two individuals being identical, different genetic profiles, where somebody with the same genetic profile will develop Parkinson's and the next will not. And of course, there's also many cellular processes that are going on. So research around inflammation, damaged or misfolded proteins, damaged cells, toxic substances. So a lot of research around this. So, however, this does create a real problem, because how do researchers create clinical trials when there are so many complex cellular processes going on? How do we find a way to focus when we have such a complex puzzle where one size doesn't fit all? And so that's why a lot of the current thought is around a personalized medicine approach. And there has been, in the area of breast cancer, some work that they are looking to as a potential model, where there has been this personalized medicine approach. So that was a hopeful piece too, that in terms of working through this puzzle, how do we attain some focus and hopefully move the research forward faster. So there are some benefits of personalized medicine, and that is hopefully to be able to diagnose more accurately and then provide more targeted therapy. Also, hopefully this would increase safety. We do know that you take a drug, you can expect there will be some side effects, and for some people it will be worse than others. So if you can have a better diagnosis and a better therapy, hopefully you will avoid or reduce some of those reactions as well. I think we are seeing that shift from reaction to prevention. It may also be that we can detect the onset of the disease earlier and put some symptom management in place to slow down the progression. Obviously, increasing efficiency and improving quality are some side benefits of this as well. If you get people on the right meds sooner, and you can improve quality of life. I went to another section on anxiety. This has really become a very prominent non-motor symptom. Unfortunately, it's got a global average prevalence of 31%. And the occurrence of anxiety in people with Parkinson's is significantly higher than that observed in the general population. Anxiety is a detrimental effect to your activities of daily living, and many people even more so than the motor symptoms. we're seeing that those with anxiety experience 50% poorer quality of life, 5 times more complications from their therapy, and 10 times greater disability. So this has become a much greater issue in terms of managing this. There are things that can be done. And so if this is a symptom that you're dealing with, you definitely need to explore that with your physician. There are a number of non-pharmacological interventions as well that can assist. Here's a list of them. We do here at the Parkinson Society BC have a counseling service, and so we encourage you to connect with us around that, because that can certainly provide some alleviation. It is, again, a free service. We'll work through a problem with you 6 to 8 weeks of sessions. You don't have to come into the office. It can be done over the phone, 1-800. And it's available for your care partner as well as the person with the Parkinson's. Another area, this has really had a lot of interest in 3 years ago. I think a lot of the research was just starting in Parkinson's and the gut. And of course, now 3 years later, we know that this is very likely got some kind of connection to Parkinson's. This was some of the rationale provided. Well, in your gut, you've got 100 trillion bacteria, and they exist along with many toxins that get introduced into the body. The gut, when you look at, not just the stomach, but the small and large intestines, very large surface area. And it does act as a barrier. It has immune functions for the body. In addition to all those bacteria, we've got 100 million nerve cells. And there is a direct connection to the spinal cord, central nervous system. Looking at people that develop inflammatory bowel disease, their risk is higher for Parkinson's. However, if it is treated, the inflammatory bowel disease, the risk for Parkinson's decreases. So again, that's an area of research. I think they're thinking that the gut, when you get a colonic tissue biopsy for, now you can have it done for cancer, that this may also be a way to predict who will develop motor Parkinson's disease. So there's a lot of exciting research going on there, and hopefully, again, will be fruitful. There was a huge poster display area. Sorry, these are very, very tiny. I was just meant to give you a little taste. Could not possibly put all of them in here. I think there was a nice mix of what people are doing with Parkinson's themselves to have better quality of life. So you see the one on the left is live, not to survive, with Parkinson's disease. It was very hopeful. I think there's, and we do know again that that positive outlook can make a huge difference to how people manage their Parkinson's. And I think as well, seeing that the patient is part of the team in terms of how the Parkinson's disease will be managed was a big focus of a number of the posters, and how they were better managing their Parkinson's along with their healthcare professionals, and also interacting with societies such as ours, where information is knowledge, and knowledge is power in terms of better managing your disease. Of course, there was a huge wealth of posters on different research projects that were happening as well. And so it was an exciting mix of people with Parkinson's, along with the researchers and the clinicians in the exhibit area as well. You probably could have spent your whole 3 days at the Congress just in reading posters and interacting with the people who made them. We had Parkinson Society BC, we had some of our own material there. The counseling service that we provide is quite unique and innovative. There aren't a lot of societies that are able to do that, particularly because we have registered clinical counselors who provide that service. I think also in terms of our support group structure, that was another piece that was we had a poster on. This is just a picture of some of us who attended, and there's there were quite a lot more folks in this little group. We just happened to be having a little conflab in one of the coffee breaks, and somebody took our pictures. So there we go. So it was again a nice blend here. I see we've got Dr. I'm in the middle, the white pants, and then Peggy Much, one of our support group facilitators, is to the left of me, and then Dr. Matt Fair, and then Larry Gifford on the end there, who's been very helpful with marketing and awareness. So one of our board directors to the right of me, two over, James Smurden, one of our great fundraisers immediately to my right. So just a nice kind of cross section of the team here in BC. I had to put in a few personal shots here too. This is, besides myself, we had Caroline Wiggins and Stacy Dawes join us at the Congress. They're both, Caroline is our senior program coordinator here, and Stacy's our manager. And then Japan has got an incredible transportation system, and this is the bullet train that I took from Kyoto back to Tokyo, where I flew in and out of. You couldn't really see anything when the train was moving. It was only when it slowed down for stopping at a station or picking up speed when it was leaving, but very, very wonderful way to travel quickly. And then, as I said, the week before, I had a little bit of a vacation. The left hand is the Dragon Bridge in Nikko. It's a very beautiful mountainous area with gorgeous rivers flowing through it. There's a story behind the bridge. There's why Nikko is actually world famous. It's a heritage site, international World Heritage Site, because of a huge monastery, both with the Buddhist and Shinto religions represented. And the bridge was supposed to be, the story is that a dragon laid down his tail so that the monks could cross over the river to the site where they established the monastery. And there's a wonderful story behind how the Shinto and Buddhists got along together, shall we say, until there was some politics from the overlords in the 18th, 19th century, but they still both revere this area. There are mountains that are supposed to be the home of Buddha, and the Shinto's belief is really that God is everywhere. It's in nature, and so they revere this because it's just a beautiful, beautiful natural area. The picture on the right-hand side is actually back in Kyoto. Again, it was a lovely, lovely city. I was jet-lagged, so I was getting up early every morning, and this was one of the parks that I frequented on my morning walk. This was a hike we did up to a monastery that was, it was 10,000 steps to get up there, and this is my husband used to work for a Japanese company, and these are some friends from those days who toured us around Japan. And here we are again. And this is just a sample of the fabulous, fabulous display. All of our meals were just gorgeous to look at. I know even at the Congress, they didn't have restaurants there, so they provided us with these wonderful box lunches every day, and I know some of the attendees were intending to keep the boxes because they were so beautiful, even with once the food was partaken of. So that is it. We will continue here at the Society to provide presentations. We've got articles that are forthcoming around the various presentations that people attended. And also we are looking at potentially some speakers. We won't have the wealth that we had, I think, from the Portland Congress in terms of bringing speakers up to British Columbia, but of course now with this webinar technology, we can have some of them present to you going forward. So keep an eye on our website, get on our email list, and watch for those pieces coming out. I think Viewpoints, our upcoming Viewpoints, has an article on one of the presentations, and so we will look for ways to continue to share that wealth going forward. I'll stop there. I'm a little bit early. I must not have talked as long as the last one I did. Anyway, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Or, of course, we will do a follow-up. We'll have the PowerPoint will be loaded up onto our website soon.